Hello, welcome to Political Bedlam. I'm Reese Smith, and I'm here with Chandler Ogle. How you doing, man?
I am doing good, buddy. Great show today.
Yeah, no, feeling kind of high from the whole experience. Actually, it was very enjoyable talking to Governor Keating. He seemed to like us, which I think is the most important thing. That's
yeah.
I think the most important thing to come from this interaction.
Yeah, I think he enjoyed talking to us, which was good because I certainly enjoyed talking to him.
And if he didn't enjoy talking to us, he was very good at faking it. So
yeah, no, true. He's very got that Oklahoma politeness down to a T. Yeah. What we kind of wanted to do before, just a couple minutes, because we're going to get to the Governor Keating interview. This will be one of the ones that we share, and hopefully we'll get some publicity from. So I know most people will probably want to skip right ahead to that. We just wanted to provide a little bit of context for people who are younger and maybe don't know who Governor Keating was. I mean, we were 8 or 9 when
we all had to do our own research to figure out about this man. Like,
we were kids. Millennials were little kids while he was.
But honestly, the more research I did on this guy, the more I liked him. So I mean, I would argue that like anyone who feels like giving this guy a Google, Frank Keating, governor of Oklahoma. I mean, he did some really, really impressive stuff during his tenure as governor that I think, regardless of your political affiliation, you will respect. And I think we should really look to him as an example in terms of leadership and finding someone to really look up to and actually.
Oh, and so and like you said earlier, bipartisanship. I mean, he got a lot of important things done. He was the governor when a lot of important things were happening in Oklahoma, and he really was willing to work with the other side. And he did a good job.
He pointed out a couple of times during the interview anyway that it was a democratically controlled Senate and House whenever he was governor, and he still managed to get some really, really impressive things done. So I think a lot of people should really pay attention to what he has to say.
Yeah, kind of want to bring you some of the stories and notes that we took away from it. Just a couple minutes. He was, as most people know, but it might be news to younger listeners, he was the governor during the bombing, which was the first real high-scale act of domestic terrorism that we'd seen. It was kind of, in many ways, viewed as a precursor to 9/11. It was the first real shocking image that people were able to see on their TV screens of violence, and just the way that the Oklahoma Public Services handled that tragedy was commendable. I mean, we handled it all entirely ourselves. We hardly accepted any foreign aid, or at least when it came to work.
Governor Keating goes over that splendidly. I mean, he obviously had a very, very unique account of the whole.
Yeah, we won't talk too much of it here. Yeah, definitely known for how well he took care of the bombing. Just for color, one of the things that I thought was really interesting was the story that you had looked up a lot into about his interaction with the Catholic Church. I feel like that might be colorful background. Could you? Yeah,
it's unfortunate he didn't actually talk about this during the.
We didn't get to it.
Yeah, we didn't get a chance to bring this up. But a little bit of context for this. He was the board on the League of Catholic Church. It's some real big Catholic Church organization in the early 2000s. And they were doing some investigating in terms of like child sexual abuse with the bishops and the cardinals, and he made some pretty unsavory remarks comparing the Catholic Church to the Cosa Nostra, and said that they were more or less. And I can't for the life of me find exactly what he said, but he basically repeated himself several times, saying like, yeah, he defended himself. He had no regret saying that the Catholic Church was behaving as a mafia type organization when it came to hiding their crimes of sexual misconduct with children and mentally disabled people, and he didn't back down from that, which I think is very commendable. He seemed to come at it from a stance of morality rather than partisanship or pandering to his demographic, I guess, his voter base, right? Instead of just instinctively taking the side of the people who would have certainly got him a lot more money, maybe more to office. He instead elected to say, no, this is wrong, and what you guys are doing is messed up, and I won't stand for it. And yeah, do some Googling on your own. Google Frank Keating church remarks, and I think that those results will stand for themselves. I just find it incredibly impressive that a Republican was able to take that stance and still hold their head high.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Very says a lot to his character.
I admire the man very much.
Enjoy our interview with former Governor Frank Keating. Governor Keating, thank you for having us here today. Just do a little impromptu interview. Thank you from all of us for appearing on the show. I really appreciate that.
Thank you kindly.
Well, thanks for coming.
Oh.
I don't have, when you're an ex-governor, you've moved from obscurity into oblivion, so nobody really cares about interviewing you. So I'm ready to talk about the grandkids and my SPCA rescue dog, whatever you want to talk about.
I don't know. You seem pretty active since you left the governorship. I don't know about like fading into obscurity. You certainly haven't done that.
Yeah, I'm pretty busy, which is a lot of fun. And
well, you're head of so many things too, right? Like that's what's kind of great. You're head of the bipartisan board,
Yeah.
right? In Oklahoma, in Washington D.C., right? I mean, how'd you start out doing that?
well, it's something that really does make a lot of sense in a society like ours with many diverse interests, diverse opinions, diverse personalities. The Bipartisan Policy Center was founded by the former majority leaders of the U.S. Senate, Republican and Democrat. So I was on a commission dealing with the debt and deficit. They call it the Rivlin-Domenici Commission. Alice Rivlin, as you may remember, was head of the Congressional Budget Office. Pete Domenici was a senator, chairman of the Finance Committee from New Mexico. So I was on that committee. The two individuals chaired it, and we came up with a solution to the debt and deficit, which I thought was pretty creative, but we had liberals and conservatives, all pretty well senior ex-officials, former senators, former senior cabinet level people and the like. And we worked together. We didn't shriek at each other, make faces at each other. We worked together to address what is a very serious problem, that is the mounting debt and deficit of the United States, particularly entitlements. So anyway, after that, I was on the GSE government-related enterprise, like Fannie Mae and Freddie mortgage financing reform panel. And we had a former senator and a former senior official in the Treasury Department involved there. And then after that, they thought that I really deserved to be kicked upstairs. So I was made chairman of the board of the organization.
Say in it. They were just like, "Here you go. You can."
Well, I mean, it was another non-paid job, but it was really a gray matter job. You need citizens, young, old, rich, poor, people of all walks of life to participate in these public debates. So that was the reason for this. I'm going to remain as chairman until the end of the year because I told him, to get on an airplane on my nickel and go back and forth to D.C. is something that I would prefer not to do. So, but I've just done a ton of stuff. I was the chairman of the board of Mount Vernon, President Washington's home, and on the National Archives board, really got into history. And as a result of that, wrote for Simon & Schuster and Harcourt 5 award-winning children's books on famous Americans, and which is a lot of fun. My 6th, Mike Wimmer from formerly of Oklahoma City University, now he's with the Savannah School of Art and Design. The 6th is, no surprise, Hamilton, that will come out probably
I've
in
heard
the
of
next
him
year.
recently.
Yeah,
he's come up lately.
Yeah, he was a guy that did go back from obscurity and oblivion.
You saw the play Hamilton.
Yeah,
you saw the musical.
It was fabulous. I mean, that's something that any of our listeners really need to see because it's really funny to see Thomas Jefferson played by an African American. Jefferson, who was a major slaveholder, and Hamilton is played by an African American as well. But Hamilton was a bastard child from the West Indies. He made it to the United States, got an education because people thought he really was a bright, capable person. And think about this Hamilton fact that you don't see in the play. But if you read books about him, when the revolution ended, the U.S., was created as a country, the United States was completely up to its eyeballs in debt. I mean, really could barely pay its bills. After Hamilton left as Secretary of the Treasury, I think he served like 3 or 4 years, the U.S. had the same credit rating as Britain, which is just astonishing, show you how brilliant he was. A guy that had a very, very marginal education. So I think for all of us to celebrate people like that, and that show, Hamilton, I saw it at the original theater, the Rodgers and Hammerstein's theater, and it was brilliant. The cast was brilliant. The music is fabulous. And it's a real diverse cast. So that's America. That's a lot of fun.
One of the taglines for the show was America's past told by America today. Mm-hmm. So it definitely is trying to reflect what they consider to be the American makeup of today, which is a very powerful image to see. So.
Yeah, because it made us in the 21st century appreciate, 18th century life, 18th century livers, and that's what I think a lot of kids who really don't know much about American history, sadly, they just thought it was great. I mean, I have grandchildren that even after 2 years, I guess, play the DVD. They can sing the songs from Hamilton because they really love the music.
Right. Well, Governor, you said you spent some time in Washington. Kind of leads me to what I wanted to ask you about. You are one. There were only 3 Republican governors before you. We've largely been a Democratic state up until, I guess, more modern history.
Oh, actually, only 2.
Only 2? Were there only 2 before you?
Yeah, Henry Bellman and Dewey Bartlett. I was the first Republican elected since the 60s.
Yeah.
And I was the only one reelected to that time.
Well, I guess what was I guess the party was probably a lot different in the 90s when you were elected. Being in Washington, do you get to see a decent amount of the Trump administration firsthand? I kind of wanted to get your thoughts on how the Republican Party has changed as the only registered Republican here.
Well, I got to tell you, when I moved home, and I grew up in Tulsa, but when I moved home, because 2 of the 3 kids, even though all 3 of them were raised in metropolitan D.C., when I moved home, my thought was I would live in Tulsa because I had a mother-in-law still living. Kathy's mother since passed away. And I have 2 brothers that live there. So I said, Tulsa's, the oil capital of the world, in quotation marks. Tulsa is green country. I loved it. I mean, I loved Tulsa when I was growing up. But the kids, we all had a come to Jesus moment. It was an intervention. They all sat me down and said, Dad, we're not going to cross your 75-mile-an-hour turnpike. I raised the turnpike speeds to 75. You get to a certain stage in your life, and my son is now the alpha male, and my 2 daughters are basically alpha females. So they said, we're all going to be in Oklahoma City, which is a great compliment to Oklahoma City, which is a young person's city. The fact is, my 3 kids all grew up in Washington, D.C. They all went out of state to college and graduate school. In one case, Carrie became a lawyer or got a law degree. And we all, they all, except for Kelly, who married a Virginia boy, moved to Oklahoma City, where really they never had lived. They grew up as little tiny kids in Tulsa and then grew up in D.C. But they love Oklahoma City because they love the thunder and they just love the activities here. So it's a really wonderful young person city, and I got dragooned here, and I'm happy, though.
Do you think your kids wanted to move here more because they grew up in D.C. and they wanted more of a quiet life because they grew up in a place like D.C., you think? Or was there a natural appeal to Oklahoma that just shot out to them?
Well, I think Oklahoma City is a middle to large city, depending on, what you consider a large city. But, what is it, 1.2 or 3 million people? It has everything a very large city has without the suffocating commutes. But the kids really didn't discuss, would I rather live in D.C.? Our daughter lives in Virginia, lives in Richmond, which is smaller than Oklahoma City. So, I think it was just Oklahoma City has all of the amenities of a big city and not the commute. And it's very affordable. That's the thing that the kids find remarkable. Matter of fact, one of the finance newspapers said that of all the cities in the United States, Oklahoma City you could spend $100,000 if you had it more ecumenically. I mean, ecumenically, I don't mean that, but more efficiently, more carefully, with more fun, and have a lot more left over by
that makes sense.
By being here.
It really does. Yeah, you have the wiggle room to really kind of do whatever you want.
Right.
So, since you've been governor to now, how have you seen Oklahoma City change?
Well, it's really night and day. I don't mean this in the wrong way, and I know I get rocks from my Oklahoma City friends, but when I was growing up, my dad was from Pennsylvania, in Tulsa, my mother's from Illinois. They did not want to darken the door over here. When I was elected to the legislature as a 28-year-old, Dad said, well, you'll learn real fast that Oklahoma City is hot, dry, dusty, and government, and there are just junkyards everywhere. You'll never want to spend any time there. And when I went to law school in Norman, driving down on 35, you looked at the Oklahoma City, it was junkyards and dust and wind. There really was nothing to be appealing to those of us who didn't grow up here. And so today, it's just totally transformed. And I think the Oklahoma City bombing transformed Oklahoma City's view of itself. The fact that there was no looting and 302 buildings were damaged or destroyed. The fact that the rest of the country, and most people don't know this, I just found out this recently, that of all the cities in the United States that had man-made and natural disasters, significant disasters, Oklahoma City was the only one where the feds let us run the recovery and the response ourselves.
That is surprising. That's
And isn't that amazing? And it's really a compliment. James Lee Witt told me that, who was head of FEMA under President Clinton. So what did that say? The police chief here, everybody, they knew me from my past, but the police chief, the fire chief, the emergency management people, and I appointed as the National Guard commander, a Democrat. I was given a little grief for that. And an Air Force guy, not a brown suit Army guy, which was unusual, as the National Guard commander, who was already a two-star general. He was, Steve Courtwright is his name. He was just fabulous. And everybody uses the Oklahoma example of bringing everybody together, discipline, response, everything. They call it the Oklahoma Standard, which is true.
Yeah, that's one thing that I truly admire about you is like from all the research that I've been able to do on you, you seem very, very willing to reach across the aisle and work with basically anyone who will, who you share the same moral ground with, and you seem to humility. You've mentioned a couple of times is one of the most important attributes that you find in a public servant, which I find incredible. That like no one really.
But see, that's what got me in trouble because when I moved home, when we were still debating over Tulsa, Oklahoma City, it was my birthday, and my twin brother and I were born in February. So my older brother and my twin brother and their wives, we all had lunch together before we headed to Oklahoma City. And my twin brother, who was chairman of the Trump campaign in Oklahoma at the time, I didn't know that. He said, "Well, are you coming aboard?" And I went, "Aboard what?"
Well,
and he said, "The campaign." And I said, "Trump campaign? Are you kidding me? This guy's been married 3 times, bankrupt 4 times. He's a megalomaniac.
Yeah.
You got to be out of your mind."
That's one thing that I think so many people, and at least I'm thoroughly confused by, is like how he wrangled up the Republican voter base so effectively.
Well, my brother, my sister-in-law, when I said humility was an essential, she said, "We're sick of humility." I went,
"Man,
oh.
I mean, you can be humble and steadfast in your positions at the same time, though, right?" And like, okay, well,
yeah, it's right. But I'm just saying, finally, my older brother and my twin brother looked at me and said, "Frank, you've been in D.C. too long."
Yeah.
So I was completely out of touch, though I did vote for President Trump.
Sure, yeah, but I mean, like that's I don't know. You got a question that is pretty specific to you. In Oklahoma, actually, 788 just recently passed. How do you see that going? Do you see that being ultimately positive or ultimately negative for the state? Because obviously it hasn't been completely one way or the other. And Washington or Colorado or any of the other states that has been legalized. And I mean, I feel like you would have a pretty intimate knowledge of like how you kind of foresee this.
Well, I think it depends on how the regs are written. The people have spoken. That particular state question, I voted against it, but that particular state question passed overwhelmingly. Therefore, it must be implemented fairly. To have the State Department of Health write the regs probably makes a lot more sense than bringing in legislators, because then there'll be a total political perspective. But what do they need to do to make sure it really is medicinal and this doesn't permit everybody to light up and weed will become another abused drug? Will that happen or not? Who knows? I mean, I got to be honest with you. When I was an FBI agent in Berkeley, I'd go into a restaurant or go into a bar and, with a couple friends, and then people come in and all light up, and you sit there, all that smoke. I thought we weren't supposed to smoke. I never smoked, and I was gasping and all that stuff, probably getting high in the process. If the same rules apply to cigarette smoking and marijuana smoking, where you can't smoke in public and all that stuff, it'd be all right, but I'm going to be anxious to see how it's done. Otherwise, I think people will buck up against it. I mean, my older brother, for example, has been terribly sick, injured, a lot of bad injuries in his home. He's fallen several times. Sure. And he voted for it because he wants to have an alternative to opioids.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of people probably makes sense.
Yeah, just like there's just so many negative side effects, like a lot of pharmaceuticals, right? And it just seems like a across-the-board solution that marijuana seems to kind of take.
Yeah, the jury's still out, but the people have spoken, so hopefully it will be done right.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that was my just because it's such an odd thing for Oklahoma to finally have gotten that done, right?
Yeah.
Like it's just curious.
Well, you certainly keep yourself very busy. Last year, you were named to the Oklahoma University Board of Regents. And a lot of changes are going on at OU right now. They just named a new president, Jill could you pronounce that for me? Gallagly, excellent. Are you excited to work with him in the future?
I really am, because I think there'll be a transition, which is underway now because Jim Gallagly is now the president of Oklahoma University. But David Bourne's been the best president OU ever had. However, it's not Bourne University. So it's important to have this new president with a whole new agenda, whole new outlook, whole new approach. And he's doing that. When he said to the students, and he was given to us as one of 7 shortlist people, the faculty and the students presented him as a shortlist candidate. But when he said, my ambition is to double the research dollars at OU, to make OU Tulsa much more significant academically, and to also make OU a very tough academic institution. I mean, I could not vote for that. I think Oklahoma higher education needs a real energy boost for academic excellence. Why do we remediate nearly 40% of the students at OU and OSU and other schools? That's crazy. We need to raise the bar, and Gallagly will raise the bar. He's a brilliant guy, and he's just tough as nails, and I think that's what we need. But we have a Board of Regents who care also about the softer side. You know, let's make sure that everything works together. But I'm one who agrees that we need a real change agent, and Jim Gallagly will be that.
Well, that's excellent to hear. But there's some other news that came out about Oklahoma this month, the debt situation. People hear the word debt, and that's generally a scary term to people. But OU is something near $1 billion in debt. Could you elaborate on that and how the university plans to move forward, knowing that that's a factor?
Well, the thing that I appreciated about Jim Gallagly is that he's living in a dorm. Now today
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Today he may be at Boyd House, I don't know. But he was living in a dorm, got to know a lot of the students in the summer program, and he had people come to him and give him briefings. When he came to us as regents, he had charts and graphs and all sorts of materials that we didn't even have.
He came prepared.
Yeah, really prepared. And so he showed, for example, he said, I'm going to raise salaries for those very important programs that have not had their salaries increased. No surprise, President Bourne had his favorite programs. I suppose any college president would. But I noticed the last program that was given a raise was the Honors College. What? You would think that would be best and brightest kids would be in that. He's addressing that, which I think is very important. But his whole approach is, I'm not raising tuition. We're not going to put the spending on the main campus, which has been, not excessive, but it certainly has not been within the budget. I'm not going to put it on the backs of the kids. I'm going to make dramatic changes in bureaucracy and downsize it dramatically, and I'm going to raise salaries for professors who are actually teaching substantive courses, and I'm not going to raise tuition for kids. And I think that's fabulous.
Thank you. Excellent. I have one more question from me, and it's probably the most important question. Earlier today, or about an hour ago, we met your lovely dog, and she is just a sweetheart, and I want to know how you met her, how you brought her into your life.
Well, my wife says that you can tell I'm getting old. No, that I'm already old, because she said, you focus on that dog. And I said, well, one thing about a dog, this is the second SPCA rescue Labrador retriever we've had. The first guy had epilepsy. No one would adopt him. Everybody kept bringing him back to the kennel. They were going to put him to sleep, so I took him. He was my best four-legged friend ever. And he never bit, he never barked, he never pulled and tugged. He was always there. When I was watching a ball game, he'd put his head right on my shoulder. He was selected as the SPCA Rescue Dog of the Year. 1,000 people in black tie at a big dinner the night before he died of an epileptic seizure. So, I was just devastated, my good friend. So one of our grandchildren said, Dad, Pop, this was at the SPCA rescue place in Richmond, Virginia. She said, there's another dog that's been abandoned on the side of the road, and she's old and nobody wants her. And I said, I'll take her. So that's Oakley. My wife named her Annie Oakley after the famous woman.
Excellent name for a dog.
Cowboy. And she is just sweet. And
I think there's some irony there that Oakley is blind now.
No.
And
Yeah, that's right. Well, I mean, I just think rescue dogs need homes. And, you could get a rescue dog that's nervous and frightened and afraid and will bite a child, that's been abused. But the dogs I get are pretty calm, watching them. Okay, let's give it a whirl. And I've never had a problem.
One of the things I wanted to ask you about, I'm sure one of the things a lot of people wanted to hear, during your second term, you did a lot of great things for education. You oversaw, I'm pretty sure it's still the greatest salary increase for teachers in the history of the state. You kind of went down, I guess, in the history books, at least in my research, as a pro-education governor. It seems our current governor is kind of known for being anti-education. I don't know if that's because everyone's taking to social media and is kind of voicing their opinions, or if there really is a major difference in policy. Do you care to comment at all about the education?
I just moved back in 2016, so what has gone before in terms of Mary Fallon's leadership? She was my
lieutenant, right?
Lieutenant governor. Mm-hmm. Everything I asked her to do when I was governor, because we had a Democrat House and Senate the whole time I was governor. And I would say, take the chair and recognize Senator so-and-so for a right-to-work motion, for example. And she always did that. One thing that I think has been missed is the salary increase of $6,100, is the largest, I think, ever. We had a big increase.
I think yours was $3,000, if I remember correctly.
But what I wanted, and we still don't have it, is to have a BRAC process to ask, why are we spending so much money on administration? We have 540 school districts. We have 47 college campuses. Doesn't it make sense to look at all that? Because if that money could go in the classroom, like we ought to have the highest paid person, a master teacher. I tried to do that. The legislature wouldn't go along. The union fought it because they want everybody to be like a World War II convoy. They're all paid at the top speed of the slowest tanker. And, who wants to do that? But we have, on my watch, charter and choice and academic rigor. We got 3 years of math, 4 years of science, English, and history through a Democrat House and Senate. So what's unfinished is to dramatically raise rigor in the public schools. And Jim Gallagher hopefully will lead the colleges in that direction. Mm-hmm. And he will say to every young person coming out of Oklahoma high schools, if you can't make it at OU or OSU, you'll know in advance because we won't let you in unless you're ready.
Right, that does seem to be kind of a moot point, right? Is that if the public school system isn't gonna get any serious improvement, then the higher education isn't gonna it's gonna stagnate at the same level unless you just outsource all your students, right?
Yeah, but see, I really believe supply and demand economics works. I had an individual who will remain nameless, who was a state trooper on my detail, who said, you're always mad at the teachers union. He said, my daughter had a 4.5, graduated from high school. I won't mention the school. And she's going to go to OU, and she had a great education, et cetera, et cetera. And I don't question there are a number of public schools that do a great job. A 4.5, John the Baptist couldn't get a 4.5. A perfect score is 4.0. But in any event, he later came to me and he said, you won't believe this. My daughter had a 4.5, was a top student in her class, and she couldn't get into OU because her academics inflated grades, and she didn't have the ACT score sufficient to get her in. So I said, does that make you mad? I mean, I'm hoping if Jim Gallagher, and I don't know if he will, says we're not going to remediate kids anymore coming into our flagship university, then you're going to have parents who are going to go to principals and say, what are you not doing? My child should be required to take harder courses. Blotting and erasing and advanced pencil sharpening are not rigor. So, we'll see. But you got to put the pressure on the public schools to break out and become the excellent academic rigor institutions they ought to be.
Is there a superintendent that's running now that you think would do the best job at that?
I don't know. My twin brother's on the State Board of Education and likes Joy Hoffmeister. Mm-hmm. I was disappointed in her because she didn't call out, striking is illegal in Oklahoma. Mm. And to have teachers... No. Striking as
okay.
I'm not going to
assumed
work.
it was
I mean,
illegal.
it is illegal to strike. If you're a public employee, you cannot strike. So to tolerate striking teachers, I think was a statement to students, you can violate the law with impunity. But all those people should have been teaching my grandchildren and not out roaming around the streets. Now, if you were able to say the only way they got $6,100 was by doing that, then I'd say, okay, I stand corrected. But I'm just hoping the new governor, whoever that person may be, will be a rigor person, not just give more money to bureaucrats. You know, why in the world do we have the average superintendent makes $106,000 a year?
And we have 500 of them, right?
540 if you put independent and independent.
What
So
you-
the money ought to go to the teachers, not
Yeah.
to those guys, in my
the
opinion.
parents wouldn't have to call the principal and complain about the rigor, right? Like the teachers would have enough actually
Absolutely.
resources to get stuff done.
And when you look at larger states like Florida, Florida has it's probably 3 or 4 times Oklahoma's population. And they have 72 school districts. It's just bizarre how we have so many, like you said, just bloated administration costs. You talked about whoever becomes governor. Do you have someone that you would, or who? I mean, are you willing to discuss who you're voting for governor?
Well, Todd Lamb was out like a son to me. He was my driver when I was running for governor, and he was a flanker on the Oklahoma State University football team and quit to help me. His dad was a guy that was in the state senate with me, who's no longer living. So I voted for Todd. Todd didn't make the runoff. So you got 2 Republicans, and Drew Edmondson was Attorney General when I was governor. We get along very, very well. But I think any of those 3 people would be very good. I haven't decided yet who I'm going to vote for. Drew, I'm disappointed because I don't know what it is about ex-Democrat officials. They all seem to swing to the left. But nonetheless, I think we as Oklahomans have 3 very bright and very capable candidates. But I'm still not there. I'm not just being political. I really am not there where I'm going to vote for.
Dang it, we were hoping we get the Governor Keating on our show nominating someone.
Now, I'm curious, just since you've been in the political arena for so long, do you see, in your experience, politicians becoming more or less polarized as they stay in politics? Do they become people easier to work with? Is it just like the longer you know someone, is it a familiarity kind of thing, or do people kind of stay pretty set in their ways?
Well, my grandfather was a mentor to me, even though I didn't know him. He died when I was only 7. But my mother's dad was state treasurer of Illinois, a congressman at large from Illinois, elected by the whole state, and he was a Democrat. He was a banker. Dad was a Republican, and he was on the city commission in Tulsa, was on the state highway commission, very much a civic worker. So I was just raised in an environment where it is expected that you work with people with whom you disagree. And to, make faces at it. Well, I know, I remember, and I'm a Catholic, so I can say this without appearing terribly blasphemous. A guy asked me, I'm going to go to Washington. I'm not going to tolerate the left. I'm not going to tolerate those people. And I said, hey, remember this. If you want to be a dictator, then run for Pope. Because that is the only dictatorship in the world where you have total command of everything. But if you're a legislator, by definition, you're supposed to compromise.
Right.
So let's start talking and getting things done. Like on my watch, we moved from 45th in per capita income to 37th, and oil was never above $25 a barrel. Why? Passed right to work, finished the turnpikes, connected every town of 10,000 and more by a 4-lane highway to the interstate system, charter and choice, and getting rid of welfare, academic rigor. And who did that? A House Democrat, Senate Democrat, a Republican
By
governor.
working together. Right?
Working together.
Joining the ideas of 2 very different parties together.
Absolutely. We need to do that.
Yeah.
All right, I think one thing on everyone's mind right now that question 788 is out of the way, people are worried about education, and a lot of that is funding. And these teachers have been without, I want to take it back to education, but these teachers have been without proper funding. And it's not just pay raises, they're also looking for finances for school equipment and new books and texts. And how can we ask our school systems to be more rigorous if we don't properly fund the schoolrooms themselves?
Well, I think money is a factor. There's no question about that. For my mother was a teacher. My wife got her elementary and special education degree. And I think that's true. However, our situation is so much different. I remember the movie Twister was made here in Oklahoma. Some of those actors wanted to go pheasant hunting. So they said, well, we'll all meet at the school and then we'll go pheasant hunting. So I showed up at the school. It was a rectangular building. I forget what town it was in. A rectangular building. In the left part was an elementary school. Middle part was high school. The right part was the elementary school. So the three schools, principal, and superintendent in the middle with staffs. So I asked the superintendent, how much money makes it to teachers and books and classroom supplies? He said, well, what do you mean? I said, of the dollar that comes in here, how much actually goes to the classroom and not to you and your secretary and the non-teaching professionals, non-teaching people in many cases in the school? He said, oh, we try to get 20% in the classroom. Well, Todd Lamb proposed as a candidate that 65% of the money go in the classroom. It ought to be 85, 90%. But guess what? One of his opponents told me, who will remain nameless, that Lamb's numbers went down when he said that on an ad.
Wow.
Now think about that.
That's telling.
What is
It
this
is telling.
backlash against education as like a whole, right? Like, why is there so much like lazy teacher kind of, why I don't understand. Like,
Well, I
do you
think
understand?
I think I may be wrong, but I think you need to have a firm figure. I don't care whether it's food service, janitorial work, bus drivers, no more than 20% of what this school spends will be in that. The other 80 will go to classroom teachers and supplies. Now, everybody go, oh, let's compromise maybe on 25%, whatever. We have to have some figure. There is no excuse, and it'll force dependent schools and independent schools to maybe share administrative overhead. Academics will be separate, even athletics separate, but we can share administrative overhead. But nobody thinks about that. But hopefully, if we have a Jim Gallagly at OU, we'll have a Jim Gallagly as governor of the state.
Excellent. Well, Governor, I know you wanted to do dinner with your wife.
Speaking of dinner, we have a question we'd like to ask
our most
guests.
important question we ask every guest. What is your favorite restaurant in Oklahoma City?
We're not leading with my job at all.
Okay.
It's completely separate.
Now, is that 360 or is...
No setup here, I swear.
Now, I tell you, an example. When I was a young guy, a member of the legislature, and trying to earn a living, practicing law, and other stuff, I represented a slug of restaurants and hotels in Oklahoma City and Tulsa. Mixed drink sales were not permitted. Mm-hmm. And they went out of business if they couldn't sell you a glass of wine. So everybody had all this charade, and everybody went to the country club. Mm-hmm. It was very Republican. Or a social club. Now, some of the great restaurants in the United States are in Oklahoma. And, I tell you, I love going all over this city to have dinner or even lunch or even breakfast, because I love breakfast, in a restaurant that is new and vital and outstanding. And if you want me to name specific restaurants, what do we say?
Please.
Three All right, that sounds good to me.
I'm not going to say it again. I feel terrible.
No. But I think it's important to have places you can go, have friends, meet friends, have a good dinner, have a glass of wine or two, and live happily ever after.
All right. Well, Governor, we really enjoyed this. We'll have to do it again sometime when you're free.
Yeah, if you, the dinner invitation is open.
Yeah, we'd love to take you out.
Well, we ought to do that sometime and then broadcast it.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
And talk to people.
Yeah.
I think it'd be kind of cool.
We got access to, what'd you say, like the one of the back rooms?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have this fancy dining room. We can just stare out at stuff and be kind of cool. We have a TV in there too. We can play video games.
But I really think that you could, because it's private. I could, and you could go up to somebody and say, "Would you mind?" Maybe younger people, maybe older people less so. But we got to,
Oh, that'd be great podcasting.
A podcast in this room from this restaurant. And would you say something about the meal and something about?
That'd be fun.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
I deserve a raise.
As long as you guys don't ask somebody who's the vice president of the United States.
That's fair.
Everybody goes,
That's
"Now,
fair.
who's that?"
Right.
So,
Well, we really appreciate it, Governor. We're going to have to
thank
do
you
it
so
again real
much.
soon.
no, my pleasure. Thank
Thanks
you.
a lot, really. Yeah.
All three of you.